Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud for over 20 years, and throughout that extensive tenure, he had witnessed an extraordinary range of human emotions and interpersonal dynamics unfold on his stage. From contestants who delivered responses that defied all logical reasoning to families who displayed profound moments of unity and unconditional support, he believed he had encountered every conceivable scenario that could transpire during a live television taping. However, on a Tuesday afternoon in May 2025, something occurred that would test his ability to navigate complex relationship dynamics in real time, demonstrate the critical importance of establishing and maintaining appropriate boundaries with former romantic partners, and ultimately provide a powerful lesson about trust, respect, and the choices we make about who deserves our attention and loyalty. The Sullivan family from Minneapolis, Minnesota stood ready to compete against the Foster family from Charlotte, North Carolina, and what commenced as a routine game show taping would transform into a moment of revelation about the ongoing connection between a husband and his former girlfriend that his wife knew nothing about. If you appreciate stories about the importance of transparency in marriage, the necessity of establishing clear boundaries with former romantic partners, and the courage required to confront betrayal when you discover it, please take a moment to engage with this content by selecting the like option and subscribing to our channel for additional powerful narratives that illuminate the critical importance of honesty, loyalty, and appropriate boundaries in committed relationships. The Sullivan family consisted of Greg Sullivan, a 43-year-old marketing director for a healthcare technology company, his wife of 14 years, Jennifer, who was 41, their daughter Madison at 12 years old, Greg's sister Kelly at 45, and Kelly's husband Paul at 47. The family had applied to appear on Family Feud after Jennifer suggested it as an activity that would create positive memories together and potentially provide prize money that could contribute to Madison's college fund. Greg had been supportive of the idea, viewing it as an entertaining diversion from his demanding work schedule and an opportunity to demonstrate his competitive nature on national television. Jennifer Sullivan was a dedicated pediatric dentist who had devoted 14 years to building what she believed was a marriage founded on mutual trust, open communication, and unwavering commitment to their partnership and family. She had met Greg when they were both in their late 20s, and she had been attracted to his professional ambition, his intelligence, and his apparent devotion to building a meaningful future together. They had married after a courtship of 2 years, and Jennifer had established her dental practice while supporting Greg through several career advancements, raising their daughter with exceptional care and attention, and maintaining what she believed was an honest and transparent relationship where both partners shared freely about their lives, their concerns, and their connections with other people. What Jennifer did not know was that for the past 8 months, Greg had been maintaining regular communication with his former girlfriend from college, a woman named Melissa who had recently relocated to the Minneapolis area after living on the East Coast for nearly 2 decades. The renewed connection had begun innocuously when Melissa had reached out through social media to let Greg know she would be moving to Minneapolis and asking if he could recommend neighborhoods and resources for someone unfamiliar with the city. Greg had responded helpfully, providing information about various areas and offering to answer any additional questions she might have as she settled into the new location. However, what had started as innocent assistance had gradually evolved into something far more problematic. Greg and Melissa had begun exchanging text messages with increasing frequency, initially about practical matters related to her relocation, but eventually expanding to include reminiscences about their college relationship, discussions about their current lives and careers, and a level of emotional intimacy that Greg had not shared with anyone other than Jennifer in years. They had met for coffee 3 times under the guise of Greg helping Melissa network professionally, though these meetings had included conversations about their past relationship, acknowledgement that they had been important to each other, and speculation about what their lives might have looked like if they had made different choices after college. Greg had concealed all of this communication and these meetings from Jennifer, telling himself that there was nothing inappropriate happening, because he had not engaged in any physical intimacy with Melissa, and because his primary intention was simply to help an old friend adjust to living in a new city. He had rationalized that telling Jennifer about the renewed connection would only cause unnecessary concern or jealousy, and that maintaining privacy about an innocent friendship was not the same as deception or betrayal. He had saved Melissa's contact information in his phone under a male name to avoid questions if Jennifer happened to see incoming messages, and he had deleted message threads regularly to ensure there was no evidence of the ongoing communication. The game had progressed through several rounds with both families displaying good energy and competitive spirit. Greg had been particularly engaged and animated, clearly enjoying the experience of being on television and the excitement of competition. Jennifer had been participating enthusiastically as well, pleased to see Greg so relaxed and happy given the work stress he had been managing in recent months. During a brief break in taping between rounds, while cameras were still recording general activity, but before the next question was to be asked, something occurred that would expose the secret Greg had been maintaining and create immediate crisis in the Sullivan marriage. Greg's phone, which he had placed in his pocket with the ringer silenced but vibration enabled, began vibrating with an incoming call. He pulled the phone from his pocket reflexively to see who was calling, intending to silence it completely and return it to his pocket without answering. However, when he glanced at the screen, his face registered visible shock and concern. The caller identification displayed the name he had used to disguise Melissa's contact information, and apparently without thinking through the implications or remembering that he was wearing a microphone that would capture his words, he muttered under his breath, "Why is she calling me right now? I told her I would be unavailable all afternoon." The comment was quiet and would not have been heard by anyone standing more than a few feet away under normal circumstances. However, the lapel microphone that Greg was wearing captured his words with perfect clarity, and those words were transmitted not only to the production crew monitoring audio levels, but also to Steve Harvey through his earpiece. More significantly, Jennifer was standing close enough to Greg that she heard the comment directly, and her immediate response was a question that would trigger the revelation Greg had been working to avoid. Jennifer asked with a tone that combined confusion and the first stirrings of concern, "Who is she? Who told you they would be unavailable all afternoon?" Greg's face registered the realization that he had made a significant error, but before he could construct a response or attempt to deflect the question, his sister Kelly spoke up from her position at the family podium. Kelly had apparently been aware of at least some of Greg's communication with Melissa, and her response suggested she had been uncomfortable with the situation and perhaps relieved that it was finally being exposed. Kelly said, with a directness that left no room for misinterpretation, "That is Melissa, is it not? Your ex-girlfriend from college who moved here recently, the one you have been texting and meeting for coffee with for the past several months." The statement landed like a physical blow, and Jennifer's face transformed from confusion to comprehension to shock in the space of seconds. She turned to look at Greg with an expression that demanded immediate explanation and honest answers. Steve Harvey, who had been monitoring this exchange through his earpiece, and recognizing that a significant relationship issue was unfolding in real time, made the decision to intervene immediately rather than allowing the situation to escalate further without structure or support. He walked directly to the family podium with purposeful strides and held up both hands in a gesture that requested everyone's attention. "Hold on. We need to stop the game right now. Something is happening here that needs to be addressed before we continue." He turned to Jennifer with an expression that combined concern and recognition that she was in the process of discovering something devastating about her marriage. "Jennifer, I heard what just happened. Your husband received a call from someone and made a comment about telling her he would be unavailable, and then your sister-in-law indicated that this person is his ex-girlfriend who he has been communicating with and meeting with. Is that your understanding of what just occurred?" Jennifer nodded, her face pale and her voice shaking when she responded. "Yes, that is what I just heard, but I had no idea Greg was in contact with any ex-girlfriend. I did not know anything about this." Steve turned to Greg with an expression that conveyed both disappointment and a demand for immediate, honest explanation. "Greg, you need to tell your wife what has been going on, right now. No deflecting, no minimizing, no excuses. What is your relationship with this woman who just called you, and why has Jennifer apparently been kept in the dark about this communication?" Greg looked trapped and deeply uncomfortable, clearly recognizing that there was no easy way to explain the situation that would not result in significant conflict and consequences. Greg attempted to construct a response that would acknowledge the connection while minimizing its significance. "Melissa is my ex-girlfriend from college. She moved to Minneapolis about 8 months ago, and she reached out asking for help getting settled in the area. I have been answering her questions, and we have met for coffee a few times to help her network professionally. It has been completely innocent. I did not tell Jennifer because I knew she would be uncomfortable with me helping an ex-girlfriend, and I did not want to cause unnecessary stress about something that was not important. Jennifer's response was immediate and reflected both hurt and anger. You did not tell me because you knew I would be uncomfortable. Greg, we have been married for 14 years. We have always had an agreement that we communicate openly about our lives, including our friendships with other people. The fact that you specifically chose to hide this from me, that you met with your ex-girlfriend multiple times without mentioning it, that tells me this was not innocent. If it were truly innocent, you would not have needed to hide it. Steve nodded in agreement with Jennifer's assessment. Jennifer is absolutely right, Greg. The fact that you concealed this communication and these meetings from your wife indicates that on some level you knew what you were doing was crossing boundaries. If your intention was simply to help an old acquaintance adjust to living in a new city, there would have been no reason to hide that from Jennifer. The concealment itself is evidence that you recognized this connection was inappropriate given your married status. Greg attempted to defend his choices. I was not hiding it exactly. I just did not mention it because it did not seem important enough to bring up. Jennifer and I do not tell each other every single detail about every interaction we have with other people. I was simply exercising normal privacy about a minor friendship. Steve's response was sharp and uncompromising. Greg, there is a difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy is when you do not share every mundane detail of your day because it is not relevant or interesting. Secrecy is when you deliberately conceal information because you know your partner would object if they knew about it. What you have been doing is secrecy, not privacy. Steve turned to Kelly, who had been the one to identify the caller as Melissa. Kelly, you clearly knew about this communication between your brother and his ex-girlfriend. Can you tell us what you know about the nature and extent of their contact? Kelly looked uncomfortable, but seemed to recognize that honesty was necessary at this point. Greg told me about reconnecting with Melissa several months ago. He asked me not to mention it to Jennifer because he said she would overreact. I was uncomfortable with the whole situation, and I told Greg multiple times that he needed to tell Jennifer about the communication, but he kept insisting it was not important enough to mention and that bringing it up would only cause problems. Jennifer turned to Kelly with an expression of betrayal. You knew about this for months and you did not tell me? Kelly, you are my sister-in-law. We have been family for 14 years. How could you keep something like this from me? Kelly responded with visible remorse. I am sorry, Jennifer. I should have told you. I kept hoping Greg would do the right thing and tell you himself, and I did not want to cause problems in your marriage by going behind his back. But I was wrong. I should have told you what was happening. Steve intervened before the conflict between Jennifer and Kelly could escalate further. Kelly, I understand you were in a difficult position, but you made the wrong choice by keeping this information from Jennifer. When you know that someone is being deceived by their spouse, the right thing to do is to give that person the information they deserve to have, even if it is uncomfortable or causes conflict. Jennifer had a right to know that her husband was maintaining an ongoing connection with an ex-girlfriend that he was deliberately concealing from her. He turned his attention back to Greg and Jennifer. Greg, I need you to be completely honest right now. How many times have you met with Melissa in person since she moved to Minneapolis? Greg hesitated, clearly calculating whether partial honesty would be sufficient or whether complete disclosure was necessary. We have met for coffee 3 times over the past 8 months. Each meeting lasted about an hour. We talked about her adjustment to the city, her career, general life updates. Nothing physical happened. I never even touched her beyond a friendly hug when we said goodbye. Steve pressed further. And how frequently have you been texting or communicating with her through other means? Greg's discomfort increased visibly. We text several times a week, sometimes daily, just brief messages about how our days are going, sharing interesting articles or observations, that kind of thing. Nothing romantic or sexual, just friendly conversation. Jennifer's face reflected the growing realization of just how extensive this concealed relationship had become. Several times a week, sometimes daily. Greg, you have been having more regular communication with your ex-girlfriend than you have been having with me. We barely exchange more than logistical text messages most days because you say you are too busy at work. But apparently you have time to text with Melissa daily about how your day is going and to share interesting observations. The pain in Jennifer's voice was evident to everyone listening, and the studio audience murmured sympathetically in response to her distress. Steve addressed Greg with increasing directness and intensity. Greg, let me explain something to you that you apparently do not understand. What you have been doing is called an emotional affair. You may not have engaged in physical intimacy with Melissa, but you have been investing emotional energy, time, and attention into a relationship with another woman that you were deliberately hiding from your wife. You have been sharing thoughts, feelings, and daily experiences with this woman instead of with your wife. That is a betrayal of your marriage vows even if you never touched her. Greg attempted one more defensive response. But I love Jennifer. My communication with Melissa has not changed how I feel about my wife or my commitment to our marriage. I was just enjoying having someone to talk to who understands my professional world and who I have history with. It was not about replacing Jennifer or undermining our relationship. Steve's response was immediate and cutting. If your communication with Melissa was not about replacing Jennifer or undermining your relationship, then why did you hide it from her? Why did you save Melissa's contact information under a fake name in your phone? Why did you delete message threads? Those are the actions of someone who knows they are doing something wrong and who is trying to avoid getting caught. Jennifer spoke then, her voice combining hurt with a growing strength and clarity. Steve is right. If this friendship with Melissa was innocent and not a threat to our marriage, you would have told me about it from the beginning. You would have said that your ex-girlfriend was moving to town and wanted to reconnect, and we would have discussed what boundaries were appropriate. The fact that you hid it, that you met with her multiple times without my knowledge, that you have been texting with her daily while barely communicating with me, all of that tells me this was not innocent. This was a betrayal. Steve turned to Jennifer with compassion and respect evident in his expression. Jennifer, you are absolutely correct in your assessment. What Greg has been doing constitutes a serious breach of trust in your marriage. The question you need to answer for yourself is what you want to do with this information now that you have it. You have options. You can decide that this breach of trust is something you want to try to work through with professional help. Or you can decide that the deception and emotional investment in another woman is something you are not willing to accept in your marriage. Whatever you decide, that choice is yours to make, not Greg's. Jennifer nodded slowly, processing both the information she had just learned and the choices she now faced. I need time to think about what I want to do. Right now I am too shocked and hurt to make any major decisions, but I know that I cannot just ignore this or pretend it did not happen. Greg made choices over 8 months to prioritize his connection with his ex-girlfriend over honesty with me. That is not something I can overlook easily. Her voice was steady despite the tears that were beginning to form in her eyes. Steve made a decision about how to proceed with the immediate situation. We are going to stop this game and give your family privacy to deal with what has just been revealed. Jennifer, you and Madison are going to go backstage to a private room where you can collect yourself. Greg, you are going to go to a separate area. Kelly and Paul, you can decide whether you want to stay with Jennifer or give her privacy, but right now Greg and Jennifer need to be separated so they can both process what has happened without the pressure of having to interact. He addressed the studio audience before the family left the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was a wife discovering in real time that her husband has been maintaining a secret relationship with his ex-girlfriend. This is painful and private, and I am asking all of you to respect this family's need for privacy and dignity as they navigate this crisis. Please do not share details on social media or discuss this publicly. They deserve the space to work through this without public scrutiny. The episode never aired. Steve Harvey personally ensured that all footage was permanently destroyed, recognizing that broadcasting Jennifer's discovery of her husband's emotional affair would only compound the violation of trust she had already experienced. The production company reached out to Jennifer and Greg separately in the days following the taping to confirm that the footage would never be seen publicly, and to offer resources including contacts for marriage counselors who specialized in helping couples navigate issues of infidelity and broken trust. Jennifer made the decision to pursue marriage counseling with Greg, though she made it clear that her willingness to attempt reconciliation was conditional on Greg demonstrating complete transparency, going forward and establishing appropriate boundaries with all former romantic partners. The counseling process revealed that Greg had been using his communication with Melissa as an escape from stress in his marriage and career, rather than addressing these challenges directly with Jennifer. He had convinced himself that the emotional connection with Melissa was harmless because it did not involve physical intimacy, but the therapy helped him recognize that emotional betrayal can be just as damaging as physical infidelity. The counseling also addressed the fundamental issue of honesty and transparency in their relationship. Jennifer needed to understand why Greg had felt unable or unwilling to communicate openly with her about his reconnection with Melissa, and Greg needed to understand why his choice to conceal this relationship had been so harmful to the trust that marriage requires. The process was difficult and painful, involving many sessions where both partners expressed hurt, anger, disappointment, and fear about the future of their relationship. Greg ended all communication with Melissa immediately following the Family Feud incident, sending her a final message explaining that his continued contact with her had been inappropriate given his marriage, and that he needed to focus entirely on repairing the trust he had damaged with Jennifer. Melissa responded with understanding, acknowledging that their renewed connection had perhaps crossed boundaries that neither of them had been willing to acknowledge while it was happening. Kelly also engaged in individual therapy to address her guilt about concealing Greg's communication with Melissa from Jennifer. She came to understand that her loyalty to her brother had been misplaced in this situation, and that her silence had made her complicit in the deception. She worked to repair her relationship with Jennifer by taking full responsibility for her choice to remain silent, and by committing to prioritizing honesty and transparency in all family relationships going forward. Approximately 18 months after the Family Feud incident, Jennifer and Greg had made significant progress in rebuilding trust and communication in their marriage, though the process remained ongoing and required continued effort from both partners. Greg had established complete transparency about his communications and activities, giving Jennifer full access to his phone and schedule, and proactively sharing information about any interactions with women, whether professional or social. Jennifer had worked through much of her hurt and anger with the help of individual therapy, though she remained vigilant about potential signs of deception and continued to process the impact of discovering that her husband had maintained a secret relationship for 8 months. This story offers profound lessons about the importance of transparency in marriage, the necessity of establishing clear boundaries with former romantic partners, and the damage caused by emotional affairs even when they do not involve physical intimacy. Jennifer Sullivan taught us that trusting your instincts when something feels wrong in your relationship is important, and that discovering betrayal requires both processing the immediate pain and making thoughtful decisions about whether and how to move forward. She demonstrated that choosing to attempt reconciliation after broken trust is a valid choice, but requires the betraying partner to demonstrate genuine remorse and commitment to change through consistent action over time. Greg Sullivan taught us through his harmful choices that concealing communication with a former romantic partner from your spouse indicates recognition that the relationship is inappropriate. That emotional investment in someone outside your marriage constitutes betrayal even without physical intimacy, and that rationalization and self-deception allow people to cross boundaries while convincing themselves they are doing nothing wrong. His experience illustrates that secret relationships, even those that begin innocently, tend to evolve into deeper emotional connections precisely because of their secretive nature. Harvey demonstrated that authentic leadership in crisis situations requires immediate intervention when you recognize that someone is discovering betrayal in real time, that calling out inappropriate behavior clearly and directly helps the injured party understand what has happened, and that providing structure and support during moments of revelation can help prevent the situation from escalating into unproductive conflict. His intervention ensured that Jennifer received validation that her concerns were legitimate, and that Greg faced immediate accountability for his concealment and emotional betrayal. If you found this narrative meaningful and believe in the critical importance of honesty and transparency in marriage, establishing appropriate boundaries with former romantic partners, and recognizing that emotional affairs constitute real betrayal even without physical intimacy, please engage with this content through the available channels and consider sharing it with others who might benefit from understanding these dynamics. The story serves as a reminder that trust is built through consistent transparency and appropriate boundaries, that concealing relationships indicates recognition of their inappropriateness, and that repairing broken trust requires genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, complete transparency going forward, and sustained effort over time to demonstrate that commitment to the marriage is the highest priority. Today, the Sullivan family continues to navigate the ongoing process of rebuilding trust and maintaining the transparency that Jennifer now requires as a condition of continuing their marriage. For Jennifer, the memory of that Tuesday afternoon at the Family Feud studio represents the moment when her understanding of her marriage shifted from believing she had complete honesty and transparency with her husband to recognizing that he had been capable of maintaining a significant secret for 8 months. For Greg, it represents the painful exposure of choices he had been rationalizing and the beginning of a difficult process of acknowledging the harm caused by emotional betrayal and working to rebuild trust through consistent, transparent behavior. The Family Feud stage became an unlikely location where a secret relationship was exposed, proving that sometimes discovery happens in the most unexpected circumstances, and that having witnesses to your partner's acknowledgement of wrongdoing can provide the validation needed to process betrayal and make informed choices about the future of the relationship.